I know it must have seemed like a very long time for all the grieving families. It was a very long time, Mr. President. 440 days, roughly 14 months. Does it bother you, Mr. President, that it only took 5 hours for Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld, after the initial attack, to recommend and endorse a full-scale offensive against Iraq? I'm not aware of any such purported claim. I have the proof, Mr. President, along with scores of documents and facts I'd like you to take a look at. Here. I see you came prepared, Charlie. No other way to show up, Mr. President. When in doubt, over-prepare, I always say. Now you sound like the First Lady. That's quite a compliment, sir. As you wish. Please continue. Sir, I'd like to direct your attention to the stack of documents in the folder I just handed you. The first in from the top is entitled Operation Northwoods, a declassified Pentagon plan to stage terror attacks on U.S. soil, to be blamed on Cuba as a pretext for war. And I'd like to direct your attention to the fact that the principal draftsman of this improbable blueprint was quickly denied a second term as Joint Chiefs Chairman and sent packing to a European NATO garrison. Thank God his otherworldly ambitions never saw the light of day. I wouldn't be so certain about that, Mr. President. I could easily say the same about you, Charlie. The next document reads, Declassified Staged Provocations. Now, honestly, Mr. President, I wish I was making this stuff up. I'm certain you are familiar with the USS Maine incident, the sinking of the Lusitania, which we all know brought us into World War I, and of course the most famous, the Gulf of Tonkin incident. Of course, I am very familiar with these historical events, and I'm aware that there's a measure of controversy surrounding them. But to be quite frank with you, this is all ancient history. Mr. President, it has often been said, those who do not know history are doomed to repeat it. And I concede to you, sir, these events are past. A vastly different world, young man, shouldering a radically different and just desperate state of universal affairs. No argument, sir. I'm merely inviting you to acknowledge some credibility to the pattern or the theme. Case in point, the next document in your folder, it was published by the think tank Project for a New American Century, and it's entitled Rebuilding America's Defenses, and was written by Dick Cheney and Jeb Bush. To quote from the document, sir, Further, the process of transformation, even if it brings revolutionary change, is likely to be a long one, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event, like a new Pearl Harbor. Touché, sir. Your thoughts on this statement, Mr. President? I would call this a blatant case of misjudgment fueled by an unfortunate milieu of assumption. For some, the uninformed denial of coincidence. Interesting angle, sir. Nevertheless, Vice President Cheney didn't stop there. In early 2008, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalists Seymour Hersh and MSNBC both reported that Cheney had proposed to the Pentagon an outrageous plan to have the U.S. Navy create fake Iranian patrol boats to be manned by Navy SEALs, who would then stage an attack on U.S. destroyers in the Strait of Hormuz. This event was to be blamed on Iran and used as a pretext for war. Does any of this information worry you, Mr. President? Should we just ignore it until these realities can be dismissed years from now by our children as ancient history as well? Of course this information worries me, yet it's not nearly as worrisome as you sitting here today suspiciously implying that 9/11 was somehow allowed to happen, or even orchestrated from the inside. Mr. President, I'm not suspiciously implying anything. I'm merely exposing the documents and asking the questions that nobody in power will even look at or acknowledge. As I stated before, I voted for you. I believe in your message of change and hope. Mr. President, I have come to you specifically hoping for a change in the perception that our government has not yet made itself open and accounted to the people. These are your words, Mr. President, not mine. The lives of thousands were brutally cut short, and those left behind to suffer their infinite pain are with me today, Mr. President. They are with me in spirit and flesh, and the message we carry will not be silenced anymore by media-fueled mantras insisting how they are supposed to feel, deciding for them for 8 long years what can be thought, what can be said, what can be asked. And I appreciate your passion. I appreciate your conviction. In spite of your concerns, in spite of what your data might or might not reveal, what you and the families must understand and accept is that we are doing everything we can to protect you. Mr. President, I realize we're very short on time, so please allow me to run down a list of bullet points that might illuminate some reasons why we don't embrace the warm hug of federal protection. We've come this far. Fire away. Please keep in mind, Mr. President, that everything I'm about to say is documented as fact and part of the public record. The information you are holding in your hands chronicles and verifies each and every point. You have 5 minutes left. The floor is yours. Brief me. Thank you, Mr. President. Okay, first, on the FBI's most wanted list, Osama bin Laden is not charged with the crimes of 9/11. When I called the FBI to ask them why this was the case, they replied, "There's not enough evidence to link bin Laden to the crime scene." I later discovered he had never even been indicted by the Department of Justice. Number 2, FBI translator Sybil Edmonds was dismissed and gagged by the Department of Justice after she revealed that the government had foreknowledge of plans to attack American cities using planes as bombs as early as April 2001. In July of 2009, Mrs. Edmonds broke the federal gag order and went public to reveal that Osama bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, and the Taliban were all working for and with the CIA up until the day of 9/11. Number 3, the following is a quote from Mayor Giuliani during an interview on 9/11 with Peter Jennings for ABC News. I went down to the scene and we set up headquarters at 75 Berkeley Street, which was right there with the police commissioner, the fire commissioner, the head of the emergency management, and we're operating out of there when we were told that the World Trade Center was going to collapse. And it did collapse before we were actually able to get out of the buildings. So we were trapped in the building for like 10, 15 minutes and finally found an exit and got out, walked north and took a lot of people with us. Who told him this? To this day, the answer to this question remains unanswered, completely ignored and emphatically denied by Mayor Giuliani on several public occasions. Number 4. In April 2004, USA Today reported, in the 2 years before 9/11, the 9/11 attacks, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, also known as NORAD, conducted exercises simulating what the White House says was unimaginable at the time. Hijacked airliners used as weapons to crash into targets and cause mass casualties. One of the targets, sir, was World Trade Center towers. Number 5, on September 12, 2007, CNN's Anderson Cooper 360 reported that the mysterious white plane, spotted and videotaped by multimedia outlets, flying in restricted airspace over the White House shortly before 10 a.m. on the morning of 9/11 was in fact the Air Force's E-4B, a specially modified Boeing 747 with a communications pod behind the cockpit, otherwise known as the Doomsday Plane. Though fully aware of the event, the 9/11 Commission did not deem the appearance of the military plane to be of any interest and did not include it in the final 9/11 Commission report. Number 6. 3 F-16s assigned to Andrews Air Force Base, 10 miles from Washington, D.C., are conducting training exercises in North Carolina, 207 miles away, as the first plane crashes into the World Trade Center.